Hello everyone, welcome back. So we have a simple example how a product can be added, okay, but we don't know what the type it's gonna come. So we used an object, and we have a problem with the typecasting and that because when you go for typecasting, obviously it will perform your, obviously it will impact your performance, correct? Okay, let's try to modify the same in a different way, which means I'm gonna convert this class into a generic class, and we'll see how it is gonna work. So I don't want to edit the existing classes, so I'm gonna comment it out simply, and then I'm gonna create a new class here. I'm just like a product here, right? So I'm gonna create a product one, something like, because you can keep the existing code, because I'm gonna check in all the code. So this is going to be product one. Okay, now let me create a constructor here. Okay, so now I have a class. It doesn't have any getter and setter because I'm going to use direct object. So the first thing first, this is not a generic class, and we want a product ID and description, and we don't know what the type is going to come. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to use two parameters here, two type parameters with the class, which means this is my class. This is a normal class, and the moment when you introduce the diamond symbol, it becomes the generic class. And now I'm going to have something like T, which is nothing but it's a product ID, and the next one U, the second, because if you have only one, it's a single parameterized generic class, because the generic classes can have multiple parameters. So now I have two, so but T and U, right? So you can keep anything whatever you want. Instead of T, you can have something like product as well, and instead of U, you can have description as well, right? And now, so here I have a product and description, and I don't need an object here. Okay, so I want to have the generic here. So what I'm going to do, the product ID becomes the product ID generics, which I provided in the class level, and the description becomes the description generics. So now what do we need to do? So it has to be changed, right? So I'm just trying to modify this as well. Okay, so now I changed my class into a generic class. Now let me try to create an object, and I'll show you what is the advantage of it. So I'm going back to the main method, and here product, I'm creating a product one. See, the moment you create a product one, it asks you product and description. So you have to provide what is the type, because product and description it's a type parameters. So in place of product, you have to provide any type. In place of description, you have to provide any type. So what type I'm going to use? So product ID is an integer, right? So I'm going to use an integer here. Got it. And the second thing, so description is going to be a string, and then it's going to be prod is equal to new product one, and here we need to provide the data. So the first one is 121, which is my product ID as an integer, and the second one is going to be product description. I can provide just as simple as soap. Okay, here is the deal. So before, when we're using object, we need to typecast the data in order to receive them, but here I'm using generics. So generics is the advantage of using generics. We don't have to typecast it, right? So prod dot product ID. Okay, so product ID is not visible here. Why? Okay, so I just kept it as a private here. So I just remove the private here. Just in case if you have a getters and setters, you don't need to remove the private. You can directly use the get method. So here now I can use the product ID. Okay, so now we got the product ID. So it's an integer. Here I don't need to convert that into an integer. You might think, okay, you're just primitive integer here. That's not gonna make much difference here. It still work. And again, prod dot product description, it's a string. So now here you don't need any typecasting at all, because I'm using a generic. So generic will take some type of information. So how the information is passed in here, because when I'm creating the product, generic class itself, I'm letting know the compiler saying like this is going to be integer as my first parameter, and second type is going to be string. So product is my first type, which means it's an integer, and description is my second type, which means it's a string, right? So let me print the information here. So product ID, and product ID is going to be product ID, and product description, it's gonna be product description. So now let's run the code and we'll see what's gonna happen. See, it's much better now. Product ID is 121 and product description is soap. So when the previous example, whatever the type you're gonna pass it, you need to casting it manually, but here we don't have to do it because it's a type parameter. When you're passing the type, it becomes the type safety, and you don't have to do the, when you're trying to retrieve some information from that, you don't have to typecast them. So there we are avoiding the typecasting, which means when you're using collection, you need to do typecasting and typecasting issue. Type safety and typecasting issue is there in the collection, and that has been resolved here. And now you might think, so what will happen if I want to pass string and a string? There are times we can use product ID as a string as well, like this. So product 1, and the first type the product type is going to be a string here, and again the description also it's going to be a string, and then it's going to be prod 1 is equal to new product, and here I'm gonna provide some code, like so etc, some product code, and again it's going to be a soap. See, still there is no issues. I can still retrieve the same way, like prod 1 dot, and you can get the product ID. It's a string. Automatically it gets that data, it's going to be a string because it does knows that, because I have the type parameter here. And then I'm gonna take the description as well, prod 1 dot product description. See what happened? It's a string again. So here what I can do, I can simply provide the sys out, Control C. So here what I can do is, instead of product ID, I can use the product ID 1. I can use the product ID description 1. So once the product ID is an integer, and the next time the product ID is a string. So but we are not modifying anything in the code, we are just passing different kind of types, but still my code works. So let me run this. See, it still works. So this is the advantage of using the generics, and this is called as a generic class. We haven't talked about the methods, because when it comes to generic, we have generic classes and we have generic methods as well. We just spoke about only the generic class. So let's move on to the next one.